The wind screamed down from Lobo Ridge like it carried all the dead with it. Emmett Granger squinted against the dust and reached for the rifle leaning by the porch rail. His horses were restless, stamping, snorting. Something was wrong, real wrong. Then he saw her. She stumbled from the heat shimmer, barefoot, dress torn at the hem, face caked in road and blood. Just a girl, barely more than a shadow. She walked like her bones had forgotten how step, stagger, fall to her knees, rise again. Emmett didn't speak, just moved. He crossed the yard in 5 long strides, boots crunching dry dirt, caught her before she hit the ground again. She flinched at his touch, flinched hard, like she'd been burned. Her wrists, thin as fence wire, bore raw red lines that no wind could make. He didn't ask questions, didn't pry, just carried her inside like a sack of wet cotton and laid her on the cot in the corner room. The old hound barked once and fell quiet. The lamp flickered as if it knew. She slept 3 days. Didn't eat, didn't drink, just twitched and whispered things without sound. When she woke, her eyes darted like a trapped bird's. She wouldn't meet his gaze, wouldn't speak, just clutched the quilt and stared at the door like it owed her something. Emmett left food by the bed, water by the basin, didn't say a word. He'd learned long ago, silence was softer than questions. By the 6th day, she stood on the porch at dusk, watched the canyon swallow the sun. Her hands still trembled. That night, thunder cracked. The sky opened up like it had been holding its breath for a year. Lightning flashed silver across the plains, painting the room in flashes of ghost light. Emmett stirred from his chair, looked toward the girl's room, and froze. She was standing in the doorway, soaked in shadow and stormlight, barefoot still, her lips parted, eyes wide. And then, for the first time, she spoke. Just 4 words. Fragile. Fractured. Please, no more pain. The storm didn't answer, but Emmett did. He rose, stepped to the kitchen shelf, pulled down the tin box that hadn't seen daylight in 10 years. Inside, a photograph, a folded map, and a .45 Colt with 5 bullets. He closed the lid and set it on the table. The girl stood silent in the doorway. Rain whispered on the roof. And somewhere out in the dark, something had begun to stir. The red X on Emmett's door was still bleeding when he rode back into the yard. Paint, thick and dripping, marked the wood like a curse. The girl stood just behind the porch post, one hand clutching the old hound's collar, the other shaking like a leaf in a furnace. "Who?" Emmett asked. She pointed toward the ridgeline. 3 riders had watched the house that morning. Didn't come close. Didn't need to. He didn't speak, just stepped inside and set the flour sack on the table, shotgun shells rattling quietly beneath the coffee beans. That morning in town, the saloon went quiet when 3 strangers walked in like they owned the sun. One wore a snake tattoo around his neck. Lacey Kane. The name hadn't been said out loud, but it hung in the air like rot. They were asking about a girl. Asking wrong. "Don't get involved," the bartender had muttered, eyes fixed on the counter. "Ain't your fight." But it was now. That night, Emmett unlatched the barn and walked the fence line. Cattle were uneasy, coyotes too quiet. A dry wind dragged smoke from the west. The girl watched him from the window, barely a breath behind the glass. She hadn't spoken since the storm, but her eyes said more than any preacher could. When the fire hit, it hit fast. The barn exploded in a flash of orange. Horses screamed. Timber snapped like ribs. Emmett rolled through the dirt, rifle in hand, eyes scanning flame and shadow. One brother charged from the dark, a knife in his hand, teeth bared. Emmett met him with a branding iron. Steel struck skull. The man dropped without a word. Another came from behind, a fist to the gut. Emmett grunted, twisted, caught a knee to the ribs. They grappled in the dirt, rolling, choking, fists raw. A third voice cut through the crackle. "She's ours, old man." He looked up just in time to see Lacey Kane dragging the girl from a porch. Her feet kicked at the ground, mouth open in a scream that made no sound. Emmett tried to rise, but the rifle was gone, the world spinning. "Stay down," Kane hissed. "This ain't your business." But Emmett didn't stay down. He crawled, hand over hand, blood in his teeth, fire at his back. He reached the Colt inside the feed bin, raised it, aimed. Too late. A boot slammed into his chest. Breath gone. Stars. Then black. When he came to, the barn was ash. The girl was gone, and the red X on the door had burned away, leaving only smoke and silence. You're gonna die if you stand up. Emmett spit blood on the saloon floor and stood anyway. The sheriff took a step back. Didn't reach for his iron. Just looked away. They got her, he mumbled. Ain't nothing you can do. Emmett didn't answer. Just limped out the door, ribs screaming with every breath. His coat was scorched. His left eye swollen shut. But his hands were steady. He mounted the gray mare before sunrise. No saddle, no trail, just the wind and the canyon. By noon, he was deep in the Badlands, where even snakes don't bother to whisper. He followed the signs. A broken branch, a boot print, blood on a thorn. He didn't talk to himself, didn't pray, just moved. At dusk, a buzzard circled low. Emmett looked up once, then kept riding. He didn't care if it was death watching. Let it come. By the second night, he reached the black rocks. Firelight flickered in the distance, barely visible through the mesquite. The old mission, long dead, same as the men inside it. A twig snapped. Emmett dropped, rolled, knife out. But the figure in the dark laughed low, half growl, half cough. Still quick, the voice said. Old Man Holloway stepped from the brush, one eye milky, the other sharp as broken glass. A rifle slung over his back, hand scarred like a butcher's. You after the Kane boys? He asked. Emmett nodded once. Holloway grunted, unslung the rifle, and held out a single silver bullet. Only got one, he said. Use the other on my brother in Missouri. Make it count. Emmett took it without a word. Still got that name? Holloway asked, voice low. Emmett's eyes met his. Cold. Empty. They still call you ghost who hunts without sound. Emmett turned, walked into the dark. Didn't say yes. Didn't need to. Behind him, Holloway chuckled. Thought so. The canyon swallowed his shadow. Above, thunder rolled. Dry. Hollow. Like God had forgotten how to cry. The firelight from the old mission grew brighter as Emmett crept closer. He could hear laughter, bottles clinking. A girl's scream choked off into silence. He knelt by a dead tree, loaded the Colt with a silver round, and laid his hand on the cracked wood. The desert was quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath for what came next. And somewhere beyond the stone walls of the mission, the devil smiled, because the man coming wasn't a rancher anymore. He was something older, and the devil knew his name. The girl's scream cracked through the stone walls. Lacey Kane laughed, boots up on the altar, bottle in hand. Ain't she got lungs, boys? The others jeered, dragging her back across the dusty floor of the abandoned mission. Her face was bloodied, but her eyes burned. The main door creaked. Silence. Then a figure stepped into the firelight. Coat torn, hat low, Colt in hand. Kane stood slow. Well, hell, thought we buried you. Emmett said nothing. The fire cast shadows across his face, making him look carved from stone. Kane grinned. This time, I'll do it myself. The girl struggled, kicked. A brother raised his pistol. Crack. The bullet snapped the rope above her head, dropping her to the floor. By the time the gang turned, Emmett was gone, vanished back into the shadows. Kane's voice dropped to a growl. Find him. They split up. One moved toward the broken confessional. Another circled past the crumbling pews. The third checked the rafters. Then, thud, a body dropped behind the pulpit, throat slit clean. Bang. Another shot. One more down, chest caved in. Kane cursed. Spun wild. Coward. From the dark came footsteps. Slow. Measured. Kane fired into the black. Once, twice. Empty chambers clicking. Then Emmett stepped into the firelight again. Blood streaked across his cheek. Knife in one hand. Empty Colt in the other. Kane laughed. Out of bullets, old man. Emmett didn't blink. Just need one. He tossed the Colt aside. Kane rushed. They collided in a crash of fists and fury, slamming into the altar, toppling it. Kane swung wild, missed. Emmett drove his knee into the bastard's gut, followed with an elbow to the jaw. Kane staggered, drew his boot knife. Steel flashed. Emmett ducked. Too slow. The blade cut deep across his ribs. He dropped to one knee. Blood poured. The girl screamed again. Reaching, she saw the knife. Emmett's. She grabbed it. Threw. It turned once in the air. Thunk. Emmett caught it. Cain charged, screaming. The blade met flesh. Cain choked, stumbled back. Eyes wide in disbelief, hand pressed his chest. Emmett whispered, low and cold. She said, "No more pain." Cain collapsed. The girl crawled to Emmett, hands shaking. He leaned against the altar, breathing shallow. "You're safe now," he rasped. "That's all." She held him, but he was already gone, or so the story says.